today we're going to be talking about Tormek, going over the basics of sharpening and understanding a little bit of the ins and outs of how this tool works and how this tool is going to help excel your shop. So the first thing I want to do is make sure your machine is ready. Most of the time when I'm done with it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have an empty trough. Water is going to go in here in order to cool the wheel. But that will ultimately be your first step, is making sure you've got the right amount of water in there, you're covering the wheel properly. So I'm going to add water to the fill line into this trough to make sure that the stone has enough coverage for our processes ahead. So this particular wheel is a diamond stone. It's an aluminum wheel with diamonds impregnated into it, and due to it being covered in water, in order to prevent oxidation, we're going to want to use some of this anti-corrosion liquid. It comes with the diamond stones, but you're going to put a splash in there. It does have a little volumetric measurement on the side here, so you know how much you're adding. Usually you're just going to be putting in 10 milliliters for a trough here. That's about right. Now once your water's in the trough, you've got your anti-corrosion in there, you're going to turn your wheel on and ultimately let it all mix together. Get everything rolling. As you can see, the wheel is nice and covered here, getting it nice and wet. So the first thing we're going to start with is this Narix chisel. I already put an edge on it. Used it a little bit. It's not really quite dull, but we're going to throw it on there anyway, and I'll show you the whole process. So we're going to use this Tormek SE77, which is a jig specifically designed for chisels and hand planes. And we're going to slide our hand plane in here and reference the far side over here, which allows us to make sure that it's nice and square and give us the nice sharp edge that we need. The last thing you want to do after you get it in here is just make sure it's nice and square. Put that up against there, and we confirm that we're set up right. So we're going to use this angle finder jig in order to confirm the angle that we're going to be setting everything at. In this particular case, I figured it out earlier, but we're running with a 22.5 degree angle. If you're not sure, you tried the other angles, and you basically will end up with wiggle and play in the notch here. That one's nice and snug. First thing you're going to want to do is set the diameter of your stone. In this case, we're working with a diamond stone, and because they don't change their shape, it's going to be that full 250 millimeters. The second thing we're going to do is adjust our angle. In this case, we're going to set it to that 22.5 degrees and lock it in place. So this is going to slide in our bar here. I'm going to set the angle here for us. As you can see, you get a little bit of daylight behind it. I like to go down and then micro adjust up. And now that it's nice and flush, you can see that we've got our angle set perfectly. Perfect. So what you can also do sometimes to find your angle is if you just take a marker and you kind of mark your blade. When you get it on the jig, get it on here, and just spin your wheel a little bit. You'll be able to see where on this one I am. So you can see here, I'm right on this edge. Now, I think my angle is a little bit different than 22.5 degrees, but for today's purposes, I want to set it that way. So ideally, you want that line to be right in the center. That means that you're spot on. So now we're actually going to do the sharpening. We're going to use the full width of the stone here, have nice even pressure, and check our progress along the way. As you can see here, that water is coming up and over the blade, cooling it and preventing it from getting too hot. It's really important for your tool to make sure that they don't get overheated. And this tool is really designed with that purpose in mind. We're going to check our status here. So you can see here, this half of the blade is getting sharpened and this half is not, because of that black Sharpie that I put on there. So I may have to remove a decent amount of material to get that whole face gone, but that's because I changed the angle of what this blade actually is. It was pretty close to 22.5, but not exact. So now that'll be set to an exact angle for us. we've been checking our progress. We removed that black Sharpie down the whole face there. So we know we're at our 22.5 degrees. So now that we've got that whole face all smoothed out, we're going to be chasing the burr. And what that basically means is that the metal that we're removing is ultimately going to have a little bit of a curl on the far side. It's honestly easier to catch it in the other direction, so pulling away from the wheel rather than going pulling away from the tool versus going into it. So we'll see how we do here. Go from there. You'll feel it after it's done. There'll be like a little bit of a wire. I can start to feel it coming down. If you run your hand gently down the blade, you'll kind of feel a hook of that metal kind of curling up, and that's what you're shooting for. That'll give you that razor sharp edge. So now that we've got our burr, I'm going to spin this around so we can use the stropping wheel in the right direction, because we want to make sure we're having the wheel go in the direction away from us when we're stropping. Now personally, I like to make sure that I leave the tool on the jig if I have the opportunity to do that while I'm stropping. Main reason is that if I have to go back to the stone because I have found that there's something that is not quite right, and I have to clean up that edge, I don't have to reset this. This is still the same as it was when I was just using it here, which means all my angles are exactly the same, everything's exactly the same. So I usually strop and then I check before I take it out. Now in this case, that little wire burr that we just put on there is going to pop off here. I just saw a little bit of it go away. And we're basically just pulling a little piece of wire off, and giving us our final edge. It's like a little wisp, just kind of pops off. So with this particular wheel, this is a pre-charged wheel. This already has an impregnated compound into it. The T8, the standard T8, comes with a regular leather wheel that you would normally add a honing compound to. This particular wheel doesn't need that. So I can go right from the tool to here without having to use a charging compound. All right, next I'm going to show you the quick and dirty way to sharpen a knife. First thing I'm always going to do is set it in the jig. In this particular case, I get it square, or perpendicular rather, with the actual blade, and I lock it down. Get that nice and tight so your blade's not moving. Next thing you're going to do is throw a little bit of that Sharpie on the edge. Now, the main reason I do this is to find my angle so I don't have to use an angle finding jig to find my angle. Next thing I'm going to do is lay it on here and eyeball where I need to be. In this case, I'm way too low. I got to come up quite a bit. I've got it probably pretty close. I'm just going to spin the wheel, see how close I was. And you can see on here, the bottom part of this is worn off on the Sharpie and not the top, okay? So that means that I probably need to come up just a hair to kind of get that little shiny spot right in the middle. In order to get that up, I'm going to lower this down. Just a couple of turns, check it again. And a little bit higher, maybe come up just a few more turns, or down a few more turns. There we go. Now if you look closely, I've got the center part of that blade is all kind of cleared off. That means I've got my angle. I didn't use the angle finder jig, I just kind of roughed it out. Now when I run this, I'm gonna go over the whole blade once, just to kind of confirm that I've got good consistency, and then move on to the sharpening process here. So we'll do one quick pass. When I get to the point, I'm gonna lift up the handle, come back across, I'm gonna check. So you can see here, I've got that whole blade is removed its Sharpie, except for just down here. I probably just need a little bit more pressure, but point is it's nice and consistent. And I didn't have to use the angle finder jig to do that. All right, so we're gonna change out this wheel to the next grit. I'm gonna lower down the bin. I'm gonna unlock it by twisting the wheels opposite directions. Take my nut off, take my bin off, take my wheel off. Hang that one up. That one on, put the nut back on, give it a twist to lock it, put your bin back on and raise it up. It's that easy to change your wheel. On that last stone, we got a nice burr going here. We could hone it on the honing wheel, but we happen to have a Japanese whetstone here. Don't need to hone it when you're using the Japanese stone. This will do the honing for you. So when you're honing, you're trying to pull that little bit of wire off that you've now pulled out of the metal. And by basically wiggling it back and forth, it'll just break off. And that's kind of what that honing wheel is doing. In the case of the Japanese whetstone, you don't need to do that. It's going to kind of do it for you. The process with the stone is no different than the process with the diamond stones. It's a softer material, so it will eventually wear down. You want to just keep that in mind. As you can see, you get a nice polish down that edge. Gets rid of all those tool marks. If you have any questions, give us a call here at Highland Hardwoods. Definitely more than happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding what jig to use for what tools. Any one of us can give you a hand.
We hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're local, don't forget to stop on in.